History made in Virginia this week with Democrats winning control by slim margins in both the House of Delegates and state Senate. And let's examine the fallout across the landscape here. Chris Graham, Augusta Free Press. The first bit of fallout and the most significant, certainly, Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin is almost certainly done as a effective politician. He had been staking a possible 11th hour candidacy for the 2024 Republican nomination on his ability to lead Republicans to wins in the state legislative races this year. Committed a lot of money, raised a lot of money towards that effort, and came up short. And so Youngkin will spend his last 2 years in Richmond, and I with authority say last 2 years, because in Virginia, of course, governors can't run for re-election. He'll have to work with a Democratic state Senate, Democratic House to get anything done. That's not unusual in Virginia. Mark Warner, Tim Kaine both faced, as Democrats had to face working with Republican legislatures. Ralph Northam, first 2 years of his term as governor, he had to work with a Republican legislature. Terry McAuliffe had to do the same thing as a Democrat. So it's not a rare thing for Democrats to have to do, but you will see what Glenn Youngkin is able to do in his last 2 years as a bipartisan governor. He'll have to be a bipartisan governor if he wants to get anything done. But any idea that he can swivel from this and run for president is out the window at this stage. And you look at the numbers going into the election cycle. Democrats had a 22-18 advantage in the Senate. They leave with a 21-19. Now, the numbers about the advantages going in were almost moot. The state legislative districts were redrawn in December of 2021 based on the 2020 census. And for the first time in Virginia political history, the redistricting was done on a nonpartisan basis. And so a number of incumbents, both on Republican and Democratic sides, in both the state Senate and the House of Delegates, were effectively legislated out of their districts, redistricted out of their districts. Here locally for us, Emmett Hanger, a state senator who had served since the mid-1990s, was among them, who had been removed basically from office just for that reason. He decided not to run for a seat because his home is in a district that included another Republican incumbent, Mark Obenshain, and Hanger decided not to challenge Obenshain for that nomination in that district. Obenshain swept to victory in his Senate race, in his Senate run. So, but a 22-18 advantage turned into a 21-19 for Democrats. Now, Republicans had a 52-48 advantage in the House going into Tuesday, and Democrats end up with a 51-49 advantage. So the House flips to Democratic control. We had a brief two-year run where Democrats had both the House of Delegates and state Senate the last 2 years of the Northam administration. That was the first time in maybe since the 1990s. I'd have to go back and verify that, but that Democrats had both houses. And that was also then coinciding with Democrats having the governorship for those 2 years. So the last couple of years, Republicans have worked with a Republican governor, House of Delegates, have worked to undo a lot of what Democrats did in those 2 years. So we'll see how these next 2 years play out in terms of policy. That'll be interesting, and that'll be a major storyline that we'll be covering, especially coming up in the next few weeks with the General Assembly. Our part-time General Assembly meets from January to March. This will be a budget year, so with a 2-year annual budget, biannual budget cycle, it'll be a little bit longer of a session. But legislators will be heading back to Richmond for meetings in the next few weeks, and then of course the pre-filing of bills will be done. And so yeah, we'll get a sense of how things are going to go in this new era in Richmond here pretty soon. But Virginia voters, Glenn Youngkin, he said the quiet part out loud. There were a lot of indications from Youngkin and Republican candidates that they were going to back a more strict abortion restrictions, I guess, and that was a big topic on that side going through this 2023 cycle, and Democrats ran successfully against that. That's the only way you can put this. The Youngkin had teased a 15-week abortion restriction, but also had signaled that he'd be willing to sign any piece of legislation on abortion that came across his desk. And a number of Republican candidates were talking about total outright bans, mirroring efforts by Republicans in other southern states. Virginia now is the wall, if you want to say, on reproductive rights in the South. The one state that has not, since in the aftermath of the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade, that has not gone haywire on reproductive rights. So, as far as Glenn Youngkin's future, I mean, again, as a term-limited governor, and that's the case in Virginia, you get one term. His out was a chance to run for president. That's out the window at this stage. Virginia still has two Democratic U.S. senators in Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, who don't appear to be ready to retire anytime soon. Warner was reelected in 2020. He's up again in 2026. Tim Kaine is up for reelection next year in 2024. Unlikely that we'll see Glenn Youngkin mount a campaign there. That would be, to me, that'd be his really only chance. I don't know that going up against Mark Warner makes a lot of sense for him. So that's probably it for Glenn Youngkin. And as far as there was a funny memo that I had to write about yesterday. His Youngkin's PAC executive director, Dave Rexford, actually a guy with Valley ties. He's like I am, a graduate of Wilson Memorial High School in Augusta County. Dave got his I don't know if it was a start in politics, but I know he worked for Bob Goodlatte, the former 6th District Republican congressman who had been representing the 6th District in Congress for quite a long time. Dave is now the executive director of Youngkin's Spirit of Virginia PAC. And he put a memo out on Wednesday that, man, it just, it's one of those things where the effort was made to try to spin losing both the House and Senate in a positive way. Hey, we gained in the Senate was one talking point from Rex Road, and we got 49 seats in the House, even though the districts were against us. And to be honest, yes, the districts were the new districts in the nonpartisan redistricting, according to the 2022 votes, and this was an analysis from the Virginia Public Access Project. There was a slight lean when the VPAP looked at districts, their voting patterns in 2022. In the House, for example, it was a 48-45 advantage for Democrats in terms of districts that were either 5 points or more in favor of Democrats or 5 points or more in favor of Republicans. There were only 7 competitive districts really out of those 100 seats. And Democrats did have a 48-45 advantage going in. But that was on the 2022 cycle. And when you looked at the 2021 analysis, it was certainly closer to 50-50. And then on the Senate side, I think it was a 2016 advantage on those 5 points either way for Democrats with 4 open seats. But again, that was based on 2022 numbers. When you looked at those numbers, you had to say, depending on which team you root for, do we have a 2021 electorate or a 2022 electorate? And the 2023 cycle, I mean, the midterm for Virginia in state elections is a really tough one because, the governor's year in for us, 2021, 2025, there's all that attention that comes from the top. People are so focused on who's going to run for governor, win the governor's race, that there's naturally a lot more media attention, public attention, social media attention in a governor's year, same as it is at the national level when there's a presidential race getting all of our attention. Just as the case at the federal level, within the midterms between the two presidential cycles, voter turnout's a lot less because your attention is spread out. Some districts, like the districts where I live in the Shenandoah Valley, in Waynesboro specifically, there aren't competitive races, and there's a number of as I mentioned, there were in the House 93 out of 100, and the Senate 36 out of 40 that aren't competitive seats. So If you live in one of the 11 total seats, 11 areas, and there was even overlap in those areas between the House of Delegates and Senate, you're going to get a lot of attention. But for the rest of us, not a lot of attention. So not a lot of a lot of interest in votes. It can be tougher in those midterm cycles to get turnout, to get interest, and so I mean, we certainly see that. And the Republicans and Democrats then thus, their focus is, do we have a 2022 cycle or do we have a 2021 cycle? And I think we had a mix, certainly a lot more of 2022 for Democrats. And I think, Democrats did a great job of playing the abortion issue to their advantage. And that issue is not going to go away. Virginia being a potential bellwether for with our midterms and now going into the 2024 federal cycle, presidential cycle. The Dobbs decision is not going to be overturned. Republicans for a couple of generations teased their voters with, we'll overturn Roe v. Wade, but really didn't make a lot of effort to do so, knowing that overturning Roe v. Wade would lead to what we're seeing, at least not just in Virginia, Ohio, a state gerrymandered to be a supermajority Republican state. Voted on Tuesday by a 15-point margin to add an amendment to the state constitution protecting the right to a reproductive freedom, to abortion. That's saying an awful lot. Kentucky reelected a Democratic governor. Kentucky, which went 20 points plus for Donald Trump in 2020, reelected a Democratic governor. And the abortion issue played a significant role there. Even down in Mississippi, the Democrat Brandon Presley lost by 5 points in Mississippi to the Republican incumbent governor there. So abortion, once again, abortion and healthcare issues down there being really big issues. So even though the Democrat lost, making Mississippi competitive shows that what you see in polls. And we've all heard a lot this week about Joe Biden not faring well in a recent New York Times poll. It's kind of, saying that means he's going to lose in 2024 is kind of like saying, well, Chris's preview of the Virginia football game says that Virginia is going to win, therefore they've already won. No, it's the difference between a preview. We have actual election results that tell us something that makes the rendering of 2024 a lot more complicated, certainly, than I think the media was letting on this week. One other bit of news, and then we'll get out of here on the politics realm. One thing about this midterm cycle in Virginia, we know, of course, that it leads into into the presidential cycle, but then also it starts the clock ticking towards the next gubernatorial. And with these results being what they are, Democrats taking control again of both the House and Senate, rendering the Republican incumbent, in this case, a lame duck, the attention turns to 2025. And, I found it interesting, wrote a column about comments made by two people who I think will be top candidates for the Democratic gubernatorial nomination in 2025, getting their victory laps on 2023, Abigail Spanberger and Jennifer McClellan. Now, we know that Spanberger, who is a Democrat who represents the 7th District in Congress, has been gearing up for a few months towards making a run at that 2025 Democratic nomination for governor, and to a point where she has been telling people that she's not going to run for re-election to Congress next year. Jennifer McClellan just won election to Congress. She was elected, I believe it was early this year. I think it was in January, February, to fill out the term of Donald McEachin. McEachin was reelected last November, but died of cancer shortly after the election, I believe in December. And so McClellan, a longtime member of the House of Delegates, state senator, was elected in the 4th District. She ran for the governor nomination on the Democratic side in 2021, came up short to Terry McAuliffe. Wouldn't surprise me that we'll see her perhaps back in the mix in 2025. And so they both put out dueling statements kneecapping Youngkin. I was getting ready to say McAuliffe, but Terry McAuliffe, who won the nomination in 2021, and kneecapped himself. He ran one of the worst campaigns you can possibly imagine in 2021, which is why we have Glenn Youngkin as governor in Virginia. But yeah, I think that we're going to see, some attention being given. The next year in Virginia politics, very interesting. Tim Kaine has to run for re-election to the Senate. We have to see if any viable Republican candidates emerge. It's been pretty quiet on the Republican side the last few months, but I would expect that to ratchet up. I think we'll start seeing a lot of attention on 2025 from candidates, not just for governor, but then for lieutenant governor and attorney general on both sides. And then, of course, I mean, not without even having to be mentioned, right? The presidential race. So a lot to come up in the political sphere, and that's one thing about Virginia, because we live in a state that has odd year state elections. There's always an election in Virginia to keep our attention. For people like me, politics junkies, that's not a bad thing. If you have anything that you would like me to look at, any questions for me, any story tips, anything like that, please email me at chris@augustafreepress.com.